Welcome back to DemystifySci. I'm Anastasia,
I'm Shiloh.
and this is the podcast where we seek the theories that we believe may change the world. Importantly, this does not mean that we believe every single theory that we present, but we do believe that it is vitally important to have a world where there is at least a forum or two where people can present ideas that fall far outside of our current paradigms. And so, with us for the conversation today, we have somebody who is doing the exact same thing, Matt Beall of the Limitless Podcast, who has turned himself, after a lifetime of success in the business world, to the question of what scientific ideas and what ideas about how the world works might be truer than we realize. And so this is a crazy conversation because we cover everything from ancient artifacts. So Matt Beall got into this subject because he got connected with Ben Van Kerkwijk of Uncharted X, and they started exploring the question of these weirdly perfect vases that appear to predate the classical Egyptian period. And so we cover the vases, we cover the question of prominence, and then very quickly we expand the topic to all of the other things that Matt has covered on the podcast, which includes nuclear explosions on Mars. It explores ancient flood myths, the possibility of crust slip on Earth. What else?
Moon landings, eventually the Kurt Cobain fiasco, so the alleged suicide of our 90s hero. I mean, we're all over the place. This is an absolute all-you-can-eat buffet for fringe ideas today, and it was super fun. I think you guys are going to love it.
What I love most about Matt's presentation is that he's not bought in. He doesn't come at it from the perspective that the orthodoxy is completely 100% wrong and the ideas that are the heterodox ones are 100% correct. He's just like us. He's exploring and he's trying to figure out what pieces fit together, what pieces don't, and can we tell a better story about the world than the one that we have right now?
Which is something that we're obviously passionate about on this show, and we're passionate about bringing theorists together, which is why we are getting together this summer in person to discuss one of those exact scenarios, which is cosmology today, specifically the Big Bang and what comes after the Big Bang morphs into whatever comes next. So we are meeting in Portugal this summer. It's going to be June 12th to the 16th, and I would love to see you there. We're bringing together an entire array of theorists, critics, mainstream repair people for the Big Bang paradigm.
It's such a star-studded group of people. We have Eric Lerner, who wrote the book on the Big Bang Never Happened back in the 90s. We have Alexander Unziker of Unziker's Real Physics. We have Gareth Samuel of See the Pattern. And we also have a collection of academic researchers that have been studying physics and cosmology for their whole careers who are starting to realize that the paradigm has to shift. This is everybody from Andreas Cies to C.S. Krishnan to Indranil Banik. We have all perspectives represented, and we're going to come together at a seaside hotel in Portugal for 4 days to celebrate ideas, to celebrate a different path forward for what this looks like. Oh, and we also have Patrick Van Reyes, who's the plasma guy. Like, it's going to be extraordinary. And we're also celebrating the 5th anniversary of DemystifySci. So it's going to be a really, really incredible event. If you can come out to Portugal, we really hope that you'll join us. For the conference, instead of selling tickets, we're selling memberships. And the reason that we're selling memberships is because we really want to emphasize that what this is this is a society. You join a group of people that seeks to explore the world and to understand the narratives and the stories that underlie it. And so memberships are for sale at the links in the description and up here. And so we'd love to see you in Portugal.
Remember, guys, we work directly for you. So this is a project that is entirely supported by listeners. But since you're our boss, we need you to check in on the financial situation, which is that this can't happen for free. And so all you have to do is give as little as 75 cents a week to become one of our patrons. I mean, that's almost nothing. You probably have that in your sock drawer right now. And the fact of the matter is that all of those 75-cent donations really do add up to making sure that we can spend nearly all of our time putting this show together and making sure that we can, week after week, deliver these conversations to you of the highest quality possible. So check out patreon.com/demystifysci. If you do join up, you also get access to special content. And perhaps most interestingly, you get to hang out with us once a week and we can talk about where this project should go, what's interesting in the world. And honestly, I'd love to see you there. So check it out, patreon.com/DemystifySci.
And you should also consider signing up for our next Paradigm Drift. We have started a new segment on the show where what we do is we collect theorists, people that have ideas of how the world works. We put their names in a hat, and then everybody gets 60 seconds to present their idea in the most efficient and condensed way possible. Afterwards, we interview you for about 10 minutes with our panelist, and we help you hone your idea. We help you get it out into the world. We evaluate it, we get to know a little bit about you, and then we move on to the next person. It's been a ton of fun. We have at least a couple regulars every show that come through who are former guests, show us how it's done. And we've done it twice now, and it is just a phenomenal experience. Everybody has such interesting ideas, and it really emphasizes what our mission is, which is that it doesn't matter the letters after your name or the education that you've gotten or credentials. What matters is that you have an interesting idea, that it makes sense with what we see in the world, and that you can talk about it nobly and clearly.
And if you blow our minds, we will maybe bring you out here for an entire conversation about it. That would be the absolute winning hand for the show.
Out here being into the Zoom world.
Into the podcast space.
Indeed.
But yeah, guys, I think you're going to love this conversation with Matt today. Tell us what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time.
The scientific revolution starts now.
The DemystifySci podcast.
Let us see in the dark.
Our trips are very parallel. Like, we're both collectors of theories, collectors of ideas, and we come at the act of collection from sort of different directions because we're curating different topics. But in the sense of, hey, there's a world out there where people think one way, but if you kind of move things around a little bit and look at the evidence that's available, you can see it in a completely different light.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I wonder, should we...
Well, I mean, it might be cool just to understand how you came to be such a collector, right? Because you're obviously extremely successful in this totally different realm of human existence, right, in the business world, and most people would probably just retire on a yacht or something at this point. And so, when did you start collecting theories and start, going down the path that would lead you to putting so much of your time and energy into that process at this point?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm successful within the matrix, right? So
The myth of our time.
Right, exactly. So there's that. But and what is success? But I guess it was Ben really. It was Ben that got me super interested in the Vase topic, and I was listening to his videos, and I hadn't really heard the mainstream perspective yet, and so I started collecting them, and they just blew me away. Just super fascinating. You could easily tell that there were a class of extraordinarily precise artifacts, and there was a class of artifacts that looked like they could have been made with more primitive tools. And so it was really Ben. And then I think just kind of digging into all of the information that was out there about them, there were a lot of questions, a lot of unanswered things that I think that still need to be understood and discussed and solved. And but I guess I kind of felt like and still feel like why not? Why not like transfer some fake paper into hard stone that lasts these objects have lasted 5,000 years, and so they're going to be here for eternity, and so it's like one of the coolest things I think that you can collect. They're one of the oldest objects that you can collect. I mean, there's not much that goes back past the 2650 BC that you can like actually collect on the antiquities market today. And so from that, even with the mystery aside, they were super interesting to me and super fascinating. So yeah, I wanted to get enough to kind of learn about them and kind of compare them and see if we could learn anything and see if I could provide anything to this, to one side of the debate or the other that could be conclusive and helpful to people to kind of understand, what they are, how they were made, when they were made. And,
man, what's it like holding one of those things in your hands with like thousands of years of history just right there?
It's kind of annoying, because like they all have this mystery. They all have like this all of these answers that we're probably, might never know the answer to. I mean, it's like they're all unique objects and artifacts with a specific history made by a specific person in prehistory, and who knows, what pharaohs have owned these things. Who knows what grave sites they've been in, where they've been buried, were they buried in a grave? Were they buried in Dozier's Step Pyramid? So those are the kinds of things. When I say annoying, I guess that's kind of, that's kind of the things that I hope that one day we can answer some of those questions, like with the technology, maybe optical OSL, optical stimulated and luminescence dating. That's like the first time that a rock like a granite was ever exposed to sunlight. With OSL we can date and find that out. So I think there's some ways that technology in the future can hopefully help us date some of these things conclusively, and we can know, are they ancient, are they modern? And I mean, you guys talk to Ben. He is 100% convinced that every one of them is ancient, and that's what they're portrayed as. Are the art dealers, the antiquity market, all of the people you know who sell these things. They've all been verified by experts, but are they? Are the ones in museums actually even ancient? Some of those, a lot of times we'll go to museums like the Petrie Museum, maybe not Petrie, but like British Museum in Cairo. Some of those were even donated from private collectors in the 1920s, and so it's like, well, where did they get them? Because that's how far back the provenance goes on a lot of those things. So, was there a forgery market? Was there a market that existed prior to the 19th century, even, where people were making these? So I try to stay open-minded to all the possibilities and not, get too like, this is the truth, because there's so many things that we just don't understand about these things.
What's the antiquities market like?
It's I mean, in a lot of cases, you've got like auctions, you've got auction houses, and people who are selling these via auction. You've got places like Christie's and Sotheby's and Bonhams. Those are very highly reputable places that do a lot of due diligence to make sure that what they're selling is real and has history. And then, you've got some places, liveauctioneers.com. I don't know how much of the stuff that gets onto that website is, what percentage of that stuff is really truly ancient. It's just hard to know. I mean, I'm not saying it's not. It's just, it's kind of a hodgepodge. It's kind of it's a plethora of different people. I think when you get people that are in estate sales, and that you've got an auction house or a antiquities dealer who is working with a family who has owned an object back to the 19th century, for example, then you can have a pretty good idea that these are legitimate, authentic, ancient objects. But it's a crapshoot, with every object. It's not, we don't know for sure.
Is that also reinforced by the lack of technology to generate fakes of high precision at that point in time?
I mean, I'm not totally sure. I mean, there's two distinct classes, like I mentioned. I mean, some are the high precision. Out of my collection, I've got about 80 of them now, maybe a few more than that, and probably 12 to 14 of them are, I'd consider to be very highly precise. And the rest are just, they're not. And it doesn't make them worse. It doesn't make them any less cool. They don't have that, perfect circularity and perfect dimensions. So it's almost like Ben had a presentation, The Tale of Two Industries, at Cosmic Summit last year. And it's like, there's this super highly precise group, and then there's this group that's more, could be made with more primitive tools. I think a lathe is still involved either way. You're not just banging away with it with chisels, not with stone that's that hard. You have to be able to turn these things and to be able to grind out the internal material. But yeah, it seems as if there's two different distinct manufacturing techniques with these things for sure.
What's the percentage of the vases that seem precise and have some kind of mathematical relationship encoded in them versus the ones of lower workmanship?
Yeah, the mathematical stuff, I don't, I guess when you look at the OG vase, which is Adam's vase, Adam Young, it's he owns that one, and you do see references to pi and phi and the golden ratio in that particular object. I haven't seen pi pop up in any other objects that I've out of my entire collection of 85. I haven't seen pi. My interpretation of the data is slightly different than probably what you've heard. I've done a lot of analyzing these objects, and um, I've measured them a lot, and kind of taken the width, the height, the mouth opening, the lip diameter, the neck diameter. There's and the lug handle max distance, the max width of the lug handles. There's about 6 ways that you can measure each of these. 7 if it has a flat base. And so I've measured basically all of them, and there's a certain percentage of them that seem to measure out in royal fingers. And a royal finger is an ancient system of measurement that is a subunit of the royal cubit. And so the royal cubit is 52.36 centimeters. The royal finger is 18.7 millimeters, and there's 28 fingers in a cubit. And so it's way more math than I think anybody wants to hear. But the punchline of that is that the finger unit, which is 18.7 millimeters, seems to show up in a healthy portion of these, whether that's it's probably in the 15-20% range, something like that. And that is a metrological standard that was supposedly developed around the time that the step pyramid was being built by Imhotep, and it supposedly didn't exist before that. The issue with that theory is that that we find that metrological system embedded within objects from the predynastic time period. So it may actually be a much older metrological system. But when you look at pi, you look at phi. On the OG vase, for example, I think it's the mouth opening is 1 royal finger times pi. So it's exactly 18.7 times 3.14. That's the mouth opening. And so, and then you also see phi represented in that. So I think for me, it's more of a function of whoever created that object, they were using that royal finger / royal cubit metrological system. They were just embedding these sacred geometry numbers within the object. But again, I don't see that sacred geometry in any of the other objects, just that one vase from Adam Young. On the rest of them, where we do see a metrological system, it's really all about the royal finger.
What was special about that vase that you can tell? Was it found in a particular location that was unique, or a time? Is there anything unique about its provenance?
I don't think Adam shared the provenance on that one, to be honest with you. I don't, and which I think the provenance maybe goes back to the 1980s or something on that. Like, I don't think we know a lot about that particular object prior to 1980s or maybe even a little bit beyond that. I don't want to speak for Adam, but I've never heard him publicly say that, and certainly he's never produced the provenance documents for the public to look at. So I don't think that one has particularly, good provenance.
And that seems to be the pinch point where most critics attack this line of analysis, right?
Yeah.
But they still have to contend with the problem of even forging something with such high precision. Is that reasonable to say?
I think we can do. I think we can make them today.
We can do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would say that that's very possible. I mean, we're doing some things that are, yeah. I think that's, to me, that's a yeah. We're beyond the point of making something to within, a thousandth of an inch deviation. I don't think that that's not a problem for us in granite today. It would take a 5-axis CNC mill, but I mean, there's spheres that we're making out of granite that are at least equally as precise as these things. So I think the question is, like, is somebody actually doing it? Is there anybody that's actually doing it? When you look at the objects that are similar that are being made today, none of them have handles. That's mostly like urns and whatnot, and the polish is very similar, but you never see them being made with handles today. And so, that's kind of the question. Is anybody doing it today? I think is the real question. Not can we do it today? I for sure think we can do it today.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't come away with that understanding from speaking with Ben earlier.
Okay. Yeah, and look, there's different perspectives and points of view on this, and I would say with a high degree of confidence that we can, but I'm not. Again, I don't know that anybody is, and I'm not 100% sure about that. But I mean, we're a very sophisticated civilization that's doing some really, really incredible things, and to think that we couldn't make them today, I think was probably not true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that having a technique that could actually date the stone would be a really powerful next approach, because because the luminosity technique that you were saying would work if the stone was exposed to the light for the first time as it was ground. The question then becomes, like, are these techniques already in the works, or are they still purely theoretical?
No, that's a technique it's very new. My understanding of that technology is that it's very new, and it's not been applied to things like vases yet. It's like being applied out in the field. I think, like, France is maybe one of the countries that they're actively using this technology. And to be transparent, I'm not even sure what they're using it for, but it's to date stone. It's to date granite. And not every stone can be dated with this technology, but I don't think anybody has thought to use this technology to date these pots yet, to date the jars.
How did you transition away from simply being interested in the vases?
Into
Well, you're also doing stuff on like MH370. You've got this Kurt Cobain stuff. You've done a lot of UFO conversations. You had one with Ed Barnhart about, was there a giant nuclear explosion on Mars at some point? Like, your interests seem to have expanded beyond simply the vases.
For sure. Yeah, good question. The vases, I have that was kind of the first thing that got me into the podcast world. Really, I really was fascinated by them, passionate about them. Started collecting them, talked to Ben about them, got him on the show. Kind of started the podcast from that that standpoint, and then from there, I've always been interested in mysteries and, like, finding truth, and just open-minded exploration of the truth on various topics. And, like, I feel like there's not always a platform for people who have alternative views and alternative opinions to be able to come out and speak their mind and to provide their truth, their perspective, and to explore things. And I feel like if we're not constantly doing that, then we're standing still. We're not making progress, and so it's always a passion of mine to explore mysteries. And so, I try to not get locked into one side or the other on any of the mysteries, from vases to UFOs to MH370 or any of it. I try to keep an open mind and just listen to people and let the guests talk and tell what their perspective is. And stay open-minded about it. But yeah, I'm super interested in all the topics that I've covered so far, and look forward. There's a lot more great content coming, a lot more great guests coming that I'm gonna be diving in deeper. I just had Randall on again last week. His episode comes out next week, and we got into some crazy stuff. So yeah, it's a dream, to be honest with you, to be able to yeah, I know how to do my job, like my day job, it's I've got that down, and I wanted to do more. I see people like Elon out there, and he's got 4 companies, that he's operating, and so I didn't want to be complacent. I wanted to get out there and kind of explore some things that I'm passionate about, and try some new things and meet new people, and, kind of network. I guess when I hear people like you guys, talking, when I hear people like Joe Rogan, Danny Jones, going on, on his podcast, you talk to these people, and it's some of the more intelligent, knowledgeable people that you'll ever meet in your life. And it's because they've had the ability to connect with so many great guests, and to talk about so many interesting topics and get so many unique perspectives. So I was hungry for that, hungry for knowledge and some truth.
Is there anything that you've come across where you were presented with a mystery and during the conversation you kind of realized that you didn't buy it? Or you
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah. Probably one, I think the geopolymer thing for me is just highly unlikely. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. I had a guest on who,
Is this in the context of Egypt or
it just in general.
okay?
Yeah, yeah. Like, I feel like I feel like that one is one of the more unlikely that I've had on the show. Like, and um, when you look at the stones in Peru, um, and you look at like Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, and that incredible stonework. This guy that I had on is like pointing to those sites, Egypt, pretty much every ancient site all over the world, and he's saying geopolymer, 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 and it's like, I don't know, man. There's just not.
Is this Marcel Foti?
It is, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we had the same conversation probably.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. His stuff is, a little bit unbelievable for me, but, outside of him, I think the guess.
Well, hold on, but like, what
Yeah,
was it that
please.
killed the argument for you? I'm just curious.
I mean, there's tool marks on most of the stones that we see. There's, I think that most experts will tell you that it's pretty much impossible to make a geopolymer like out of out of granite. Like you can't really. It's not possible. Like it's, I guess. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense when you talk about the feldspar and like the mica and the hornblende, and attempting to get all of that stuff in there, in the quartz crystal, and like mix it with some water or soluble substance. Like he's saying that when you see a object like this, for example, and he's saying that this is geopolymer, and you've got all of these quartz crystals within this diorite object here, and you can see them, and they're all embedded within the rock. And so if you're making this out of a geopolymer, what are you doing? Are you putting little chunks of quartz crystal into there and just like mixing it around with your hands and trying to make sure that they're all like equally spaced apart? I mean, the only place that quartz forms is under intense pressure, and it doesn't so are you taking the quartz from other rocks that have formed, and somehow chipping it out with tools and putting it into this mix with water, and mixing it up? And it's just, the whole thing is just, I think, a little bit silly. But again, like, other people have probably done more research on this, and other people have probably, I know that there's a lot of smart people out there that really follow and appreciate Marcel's work, that have studied a lot about it, and think that he's onto something. I'm just not one of them.
How do you handle that when you're talking with somebody who their theory kind of falls apart in your hands while
I
you're
went
speaking with
into
them?
I went into it completely open-minded. I mean, if I'm having a guest on, I'm going to be open-minded about their topic that they're presenting. And it wasn't until months after that episode recording that I kind of started to dig into some of the, the question marks behind it. And that's kind of when it got to the point of, okay, yeah, that one is not really for me. But I don't want to disparage the guy,
Well, I think that the proof comes down to whether or not you can reproduce it, right? And so Marcel's always trying to make stuff out of geopolymers, and he has success at it, right? He can make these stone pyramids, he can make something that is stone-like in the sense that it responds to various stresses and attempts to break it or whatever else. But everything that he makes is really uniform. It's this kind of uniform gray or uniform white. Sometimes you can make it rose, but the crystals that are inside of it are very, very small. And this has actually been the same criticism that every time that we've put it in front of somebody, they're always like, well, what about these massive veins of crystal? Like, how do you get these inclusions inside of a geopolymer? And I do think that if he could figure out how to make that work, if he could actually make anything, any object that has these inclusions in it in a way that then doesn't have to be machined, right? Because you pulled up that vase just now, and it has inclusions in the rock that are smoothed along the curvature of the vase. And so if you have rocks that you're just throwing in there that are literally just jagged pieces, like how do you end up in a position where you have an object that's so smooth without then being a machining step involved? Like, I think that that's the question. And with any of these hypotheses, I always feel like the great challenge is being able to make something that recapitulates the explanation that you're proposing. Because at the end of the day, like, theory is only as good as the product that you can make of it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess there's even a question as to whether or not he's actually making anything. I mean, like his last video, I guess it was Jimmy Corsetti kind of called him out that he switched the rock, like he switched the stone within the pot that he was working in. And, I mean, it looked like Jimmy was right. Like it looked like it was a completely different rock that he had put in there. And so I don't know.
The old David Copperfield.
Yeah. I didn't get a great feeling on the podcast, and there's nothing since then that's been, convincing to me that this could be possible. I think that having visited Machu Picchu and Peru and all those ancient sites in the Sacred Valley just this last year in November, I think that the acid is a much more likely possibility than geopolymer. For creating those oddly shaped polygonal walls. I think that geopolymer and hammer and chisel for me are about equally as unlikely. Very, very small percentage that could be true. I'd say geopolymer is probably last, hammer and chisel probably second to last, but near the bottom. And for me, this acid theory of softening the stones and laying them on top of each other and having them soften and then expand. And that could potentially even explain the nubs that we see if you're rubbing this acid on a spot to release the pressure and have it expand and create that nub. I haven't heard anybody talk about that, but I feel like that's a new one for that I'll drop on this show. But
I came across that too. It seems like there's actually some tradition within the indigenous peoples of using different plant mixtures to soften stone.
Right.
Are you aware of that?
I am. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. There's a really good video that ancient architects created about 5 years ago on the stones in South America, and it's like this orangish red paste. But yeah, I have heard of these plants that occur naturally as well. But when you look at the stones, there's almost always this orangish red paste that exists where the stones come together, and it's like it doesn't look like whatever that stuff is, lichen or whatever. It looks like it's like something that's like stuck on there, pasted. You scrape it with your nail, you're not getting that stuff off. It's like it's not moving, it's not coming off. and there's legends about the Inca that they used this paste to soften the stones when they were building them. So I feel like that. I feel like when you if it was hammer and chisel, then why don't we see tool marks where the stones have come together? Like it's always perfectly smooth, almost as if it's polished, where the stones have come together. There's never any indentations. I mean, to think that you could just sit there with a hammer and chisel and like create these perfect outlines and then fit them together just seems more magical and ridiculously unrealistic than anything, including Geopolymer. But you do see sometimes you see those hammer marks on the front of the stone. So if you've got a big stone and they wanted to like flatten off a rounded part of it, and to make it totally flat, a lot of times you're going to see these little indentations on the front of the stone, but you never see them where the stones are connected, where the stones touch. And so for me, I mean, that's I think a big clue as to the manufacturing technique, that these things were potentially pressed together with a lot of weight, the weight of their own, with the weight of the stone, and that over time they just kind of, molded themselves into place. So,
yeah, I like it. I like that idea too. That seems the most compelling to me. So Anastasia mentioned MH360, which
we haven't
nobody knows anything about,
touched.
but how about MH370? I'm curious.
Sorry, wait, is it 370? Sorry,
Yeah.
like I said, I know nothing about that.
What's your favorite theory for MH370?
Oh man, I had Ashton on, and he's Ashton's a great guy, and he's very passionate about this. I love Ashton because he's like one of the only people out there that's actually researching this topic. And I mean, planes don't disappear. I think that's the place where we should start with this topic. Like, we know where that plane is and what happened to the plane. I mean, the United States government, we've got satellites everywhere. We've got tracking devices. It's got, it doesn't, like, that doesn't go away. So there's something very strange about that plane disappearing in the first place. And I think Ashton proposes a really unique and interesting theory about it. And his theory is that that the video is real. That video, I'm sure you guys have seen it. It has the three.
Have you seen this one, Nastia? There's like these orbs circling the plane, and then it just like disappears.
Yeah, and so I've seen actually Ashton's presentation on it, and I've also I'd like peripherally seen that he had some kind of like military patent for like weird plasma weapons of some kind. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's basically it. Yeah. Yeah, he thinks that these three plasma orbs teleported the plane to a different location, and he thinks that Edward C. Lin is a guy who was tried for espionage and war crimes, actually, I don't think it even went to trial, but he thinks that he's the guy that leaked the videos, and it's about the only theory out there right now, that's like, I haven't heard any other explanation for what happened to the plane, and his is super compelling. We talked about it for 3 hours, on the podcast. I'm not saying that it's the truth or the answer, but I think it's definitely worth following and looking into and continuing to, kind of, let's try to figure out what actually happened here so that we can get some closure for the families.
Is it overall a reflection of how a lot of the UAP stuff is kind of coalescing to domestic military technology of some kind? Or is this a separate branch of some UAPs are military and some are extraterrestrial?
I don't know. I mean, I think that what he's more on the side of that this is all that it's reverse engineered technology, but this is in the United States government's hands now, and that it's like that we have this technology, and that that on that plane there was a group of Chinese scientists and engineers who were going back to China that had infiltrated, I think it was Lockheed Martin, and that were taking the technology back to China, and that this was the United States's big kind of FU to China for attempting to steal our military secrets, and that we were going to show them, that the technology and put it on full display for them to see, teleport the plane, and since then our relationship with China has been garbage, basically. So that's kind of, I think, his perspective on the topic. But
seems like there's kind of a diet version of this theory available as well, where these plasma entities, like if this video proves out to be legitimate, that you could have a cloaking mechanism of some sort and have essentially just abducted the plane, sort of surreptitiously piloted it somewhere and done God knows what with its inhabitants. What do you make of the little pieces of the plane that they claim to have found? Didn't they find like a piece of the wing or something like that out in, where was it, Madagascar or something like that?
that's what they say. Yeah, yeah. According to Ashton, and I'm not the expert on this one, but according to Ashton, there's no way that could have gotten there in that period of time from when it crashed. It's just too far for where the plane was to where that debris was found. And the other interesting thing about the debris that was found is that the serial number was removed from it, so there was no real evidence to say that this was the exact. This is according to Ashton, but there was no real evidence to say that this was the exact plane that had crashed. I think he's thinking that we're probably dumping some stuff out into the ocean just to keep people on these wild goose chases. But
provenance of artifacts, man. It always comes back to bite you.
Well, you'd think that if you were dumping pieces of a plane that you were trying to convince people that you had found, you'd put multiple serial numbers on every single component to demonstrate.
Right.
Like who's ever doing this is doing it in a super weird way.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, the algae has eaten off this specific serial number. How strange.
Yeah, that should be the easiest part to fake.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this kind of stuff makes me feel like it's such a weird and unpleasant world to live in where this would be happening.
Mhm.
Where I always think about the Plato's cave where there's the shadows and then there's the real world. And it gives you this really gateway drug into questioning every single level of reality, where I entertain it and I think it's interesting, but at the same time, I just see the vast chasm that yawns when all of a sudden everything is not as it seems, from
Right.
ancient Egypt to where did MH370 go?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Does it ever keep you up at night, or are you just totally you have good psychological defenses?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I mean, it's some of it's interesting though. I mean, I love exploring the topics, but I don't worry about them too much. I mean, the more recent one that I did was with Bart Sibrel. Have you guys heard of Bart? He's the moon landing fraud guy.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I think I heard him on. Was he on Rogan at some point?
He went on Rogan. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he was on Rogan. I think I'm the only other major podcast to have him on. And then Danny Jones picked him up as he was leaving the country. Danny's a good friend of mine. Knew that he was in the country, and so he's going to have an episode with him coming out here in a couple of weeks as well. But that was super interesting. I mean, yeah, it's a wild conspiracy theory. Of course, Bart is 100% convinced that there's no way possible that we went to the moon, and he provided, I think some relatively compelling evidence. That
thing with the portal on the spacecraft and the taking the picture of the Earth, that was really interesting to me. Of all of the pieces of evidence that one could dig up, that's a really, really interesting case, and you can watch the video. I think on his website.
What's the video? I haven't seen it.
Let's see if I can recall. This has been like 6 months, but it's basically it's this video essentially of showing how you can make the Earth look like it's far away by just taking a high contrast photograph, but I guess playing with the aperture of the camera in such a way that you have a dark cabin and you have this bright light of the Earth glow while you're in low Earth orbit. And then by kind of framing the shot right, it looks like the Earth is actually far away. But you can see at some point they're messing with the lighting in the cabin, and there's a little tag of the video that's available that he shows where you can see them kind of changing the circumstances. And I want to say also maybe trying to put some sort of a crescent shape on it too at some point. There's some video of them manipulating, I don't know if it's like a sheet or a dinner plate or something like that to get this crescent form. I'm oh, damn it, I don't want to be held to these details, but you guys should go watch the video. Like, it's on his website, and it's pretty damning. I mean, I'm not saying that it means that they didn't take a picture from halfway to the moon, but they didn't need to have done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you can get that shot without doing it. It proves that much, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting theory, and I mean, there's some evidence. The one that I didn't agree with, the piece of evidence, was the photograph that he showed, where you've got these. Well, he's showing shadows on images that were taken on the moon, and the shadows are going kind of in like towards each other, and he says that shadows always run parallel, period. And they're like, shadows are, if you've got one light source, the shadows are always going to run parallel. But these shadows were running towards each other. But I think that's just because the ground was sloped. Like, I mean, really simple, like because if there's two light sources, he's saying it's from electrical light, and there was two light sources. If there's two light sources, the shadows aren't going to be just going this way. They're also going to be going this way. You're going to have one shadow going this way, and then the shadow's also going this way, and you just have them going in towards each other. So, pretty sure that's just because the ground was sloped. But there's some interesting stuff. I mean, we've never, since 1972, we've never sent human beings, past where the ISS, the International Space Station, is today, and it's 1,000 times farther to the moon than it is to the ISS, and it's like you have to go through the Van Allen radiation belt to get to the moon, and he doesn't think that it's possible to send humans through the Van Allen radiation belt. And we've been trying with the Artemis missions over the last couple of years, and they keep getting delayed and they keep getting pushed back. And it's not the first time that we've tried and failed to get people to the moon, and since 1972. So, when we just created the microwave, could we have, did we really have the capability, to get people there? I think it's a valid question. A lot of people get really pissed off about this question, and there's been some videos that kind of debunk and explain all of the, that paint him to be, just a bullshit artist, basically. And there's some good arguments and some good truths to I think the debunking side of this. And it's certainly very possible that we win. I don't know. I think it's probably, I'm probably like 20% chance that we didn't go, 80% chance that we did go after researching all of the stuff. But I'm open, to either perspective, and we'll probably never know, sadly.
My instinct about it is geopolitical in nature, where I'm like, if the United States fakes it, isn't it in the interest of every single country that wants to embarrass the United States to demonstrate that they've faked it?
Yeah.
Like, why is there not a massive effort on the part of, you could put anybody into that bin, like Russia, China, Iran, some kind of coalition that's like, we're going to take down the entire paradigm of the United States by demonstrating.
There's been some Russians who've come forward lately from that era who claimed that they believed the United States faked it.
That's true, but why would it not be the dominant effort of a country? Like, if this is like, we have a friend who talks about the level of conspiracies that you see in the world, where if you're like level 0, everything is exactly as it seems, and there's nobody pulling any kind of
As
string.
seen on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Believe everything that everyone says, right?
Yeah, this is actually really funny because I mentioned my brother earlier, and we were talking about the moon landing, and he's like, well, it was on television. And I'm like, come on, man. What it would be like to live in a world where you believe what's on television. But I'm like, if I am a leader of a country that wants nothing more than to embarrass the United States, I would put every single resource I had into making sure that I could demonstrate that. And so it's weird.
Unless you believed it.
Unless you believed it, but I'm like, is that possible? Like, if you're a country that is attempting to also go to the moon, right? Because it was a space race, Russia, the Soviet Union was also trying to go. And the Soviet Union's like, every single scientist in the Soviet Union is saying, this is impossible. Like, we can't possibly do this. They can't possibly have done it. It seems insane to me that the Soviet Union didn't then attempt to disprove it, which then leads me into the next level of conspiracy thinking, because it's like, okay, well then is there some sort of unified deep state for whom it's important to convince the world that we did go to the moon that is at some level above this artifice of nations?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he's saying that basically that Russia has been blackmailing us, that they know that we didn't go, and that adds this whole other level of conspiracy, and it makes it a little bit more hard to believe that could be going on, and that we're somehow being blackmailed by Russia for the last 80 years or so, whatever.
I mean, one thing's for sure: those guys acted super weird after they got back.
They did. They did.
That's actually like at an intuitive gut level. Watching those interviews is one of the more compelling pieces of evidence for me. I'm just like, these guys don't look like national heroes who just got back from the moon. Like, if I just got back from the moon for the first time, I'll be like parading down the street in like a Roman triumph. Like, it would be I can't imagine like a more glorious return.
Right.
So Shiloh would rent a chariot for the occasion, white horses.
Right. Well, and there's no images of Neil Armstrong on the moon, so that's pretty interesting. The Buzz Aldrin, when this was just I think within the last 10 years, he was asked a question by an 8-year-old girl and said, like, why haven't we sent anybody back to the moon? And he's like, well, because we didn't go there. He literally said that. Like, he literally said that. And then he kind of like talked his way, like, not even really out of it. Like, he kind of I've got this clip on the episode where he says, because we didn't go there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. How have I not heard that?
Yeah. It's a wild clip. It's I'll share it with you. Ryan will get it over to you. But
that's crazy. Yeah. We need to insert that at this point in the podcast. Let's edit that in.
I made a note. That's wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Wow.
Well, okay, there's another level of this, which is really interesting to me, because I feel like there's definitely things that are aligned with state interests that you're not allowed to talk about in public. Like, if you go through the YouTube community guidelines, you can get a rough sense of statecraft goals, right? Because I can't even list the things you're not allowed to mention, because the moment that you even reference the meta level state,
don't use the keywords.
Don't use the keywords.
But not just state crafting, but also sponsor crafting.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's really interesting to me that there seems to be a subset of things that you are allowed to talk about that are not that are I don't want to say conspiratorial, but there needs to be a better word for it, because I hate to say conspiratorial because that
just
implies
fringe ideas, whatever.
Fringe ideas,
theory,
oppositional ideas, heterodox ideas, like UAPs, ancient history. Even in some ways, I feel like the moon landing.
Actually, no. I thought about that. I think moon landing doesn't fit into that on YouTube, because if you go to YouTube and search like alternative explanations for the moon landings or where the moon landings faked, like, you just get a bunch of debunking videos. It's very hard to actually find interesting alternative takes on the moon landings through the search algorithms of YouTube.
And so,
but the other ones I agree, like UAPs all day long, ancient history all day long. But yeah, you get into medical science or, things that impugn the state in any way. Yeah, you're in trouble.
Hold on, I'm going to sneeze.
Bless you in advance.
No, I'm not. Okay, I'm sorry. Carry on. I'll make a note.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, there's some stuff. I mean, the government is telling us that UAP is real now, So, I mean, if you're if you don't believe in UAP, you're fringe at this point. I think you're the conspiracy. You're the conspiracy theorist. Like they're studying them and they're telling us that they're real and that they're in our airspace and we don't know what they are, and like they're not ours and we don't think they're Russia's or China's. So it's like that's they're talking about it. So yeah, that's certainly fair game for everybody to talk about. Now they want us talking about it for some reason. I think I like to think that they're actually being transparent with that and telling us what they actually know. And I think they probably are, just because there's so much evidence out there now. I mean, there's so many videos. There's so much just the freaking Nimitz incident. I mean, that one is completely impossible to debunk. And it's like, well, what was it? What happened? You've got 6 pilots. You've got they all saw the same thing. It was picked up on forward-looking infrared. It's picked up on we saw it accelerate at like 60,000 miles per hour to the cap point of the pilots. And like, I mean, that's real. That actually happened. So, that's not conspiracy. That's not like crazy lunatic fringe. That's like, if you look into like that incident and that event, I mean, those guys testified in front of Congress, and the evidence is there for anybody to see. So,
See, I heard a really good takedown of that one from my dad, actually. He found this Forbes article around the same time that was advertising this new defense sector technology, which was these holographic projections that had heat signatures, and they could basically simulate airplanes and whatever the heck they wanted. And he was just like, that's what the TikToks are. I was like, it's actually a cool theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like it's possible, and that there were private endeavors to develop technology that could accomplish the same thing through these holographic laser projections from satellites. And so, of course, if you move a laser pointer, it will appear to move a lot faster than physics would allow an object to move.
Yeah, but they captured it in space, dropping from 80,000 feet into space, going down to the surface level of the ocean, like in like a second and a half. I mean, I don't, and then you've got eyewitnesses that saw this massive object underneath the water. Could that be a hologram? Because it's like it's literally like making the water.
I was thinking that one was like maybe there was a sub that it was coupled to somehow, like it was part of the decoy in some sense. I mean, I'm really reaching here, but if I wanted to try to make it happen with the holographic technology, I would basically have a submarine participate in the exercise. And then I would also, if I was thinking about adopting this for my military, I would probably try it out on some of my own guys first and see if it legitimately distracted them, and if they like kind of went after it, and how much confusion it introduced, because my ultimate plan was to use it against my enemies. So what better way to find out than on my best guys?
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. The one that gets me is the 62 school children in Zimbabwe, the aerial school, where these kids all saw a spacecraft land in their playground, and they all went up to it and saw it. Are you guys familiar with this story?
Vaguely.
I
Yeah.
don't think so. Yeah, I think I heard about one like that in Brazil or something, but
Yeah, Brazil had another one that was kind of similar. Yeah, but all these kids were between the age of first grade and eighth grade, and the teachers, a lot of the teachers saw it. A couple of the teachers said that they were visited afterwards by again, and they're still talking about it today. Like all the kids, you can interview them, you can find videos with them, and they're visually like shaken up and disturbed, and like it's kind of ruined their lives. And it's they don't know what to do with the message, with the information that they were given kind of telepathically from this being that was on top of this craft. And it's like, I mean, these are, as crazy as all this sounds, it's like, I mean, you can tell when people are lying. And why would 60 plus kids make up the same story? They all drew the same thing. Some Harvard psychologist went and Dr.
John Mack.
Yeah, there you go. Went and interviewed them, and they're drawing pictures of what they saw, and all very, very similar images. And so, I mean, there's some incidents that between those, and I interviewed Nick Pope on my channel, and he was in charge of the Ministry of Defense's UAP program, UFO program in the 90s, and there's stuff that he just can't explain. I mean, there's incidents where people have literally gone up and touched spacecraft that they know are not from Earth, and like this guy went up and touched it and got this download of zeros and ones, and just crazy stuff. But like, I mean, this guy and this is a public facing UFO program that Nick Pope was in charge of. And, for him to come out and say, yeah, there's absolutely, there were craft and incidents that we just can't explain. I mean, it's either the biggest like global government conspiracy, like fake news that's ever, but it would also have to include so many civilians and so many people that that swear that they've seen what they've seen, and that that they're telling the truth, that it's like, it's almost more crazy to think that it could be that big of a like a hoax than.
Well, don't you think it could be like a kind of a little bit of everything too? Like, if there is some absolutely inexplicable things happening, it would perhaps serve as a good smokescreen for other business that interested parties might be conducting simultaneously. Like, I feel like I feel like the reports are so different sometimes, and the experiences are so wide ranging that it's kind of like when we talk about cancer, like we're really talking about like gazillion of different effects, right, and different pathologies, but we use this same word for it, and sort of anomalous objects, lights, experiences from the skies, like it gets wrapped into the concept of UAPs, but we might be talking about all sorts of different stuff.
What I love about the reports, though, so I read John Mack's book about this, and it's really funny because if this is a large-scale conspiracy that's mixed into some kind of accurate, real-world event, the message is like, take care of the planet, don't screw this up. That's
Right.
universally reported, like, your job is to fix this. And so it's just amusing for me to think that the deep state's entire messaging through this campaign is like, don't fuck this up.
Right. That's funny. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's a very good point. That's really hasn't been their message to us.
Yeah.
But why are the aliens going and just talking to guys at lumber mills or farmers or something? Like, why don't they go talk to the Washington people who can actually change the policy?
There's
Food
a
for
lot of
thought.
questions. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that there is some permissivity, right? Like, I think that there's some people that are more open to it. Like, as I was reading John Mack's book, I was really surprised because it felt like he didn't really interrogate what it was about the people that were experiencers that made them capable of experiencing. Because almost every single one of them had some kind of deep psychological trauma, or they were alienated in some way, or there had been some fracture event for their psyche to open in a way that maybe you just don't have as a political leader who's very preoccupied with, the affairs of state. And so I wonder if there isn't, if there are true extraterrestrial non-human entities that people are interacting with, it seems plausible that there would be some kind of next level opening that's necessary for it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah, you got me thinking about Chris Bledsoe. He's had 2 near-death experiences, and he was on my podcast, and we talked about his he claims to have been abducted, and he's got this incredible story. But 2 near-death experiences. I mean, I had him in town, and we went UFO watching. To try to see if we could see anything, and we saw nothing. Of course, sadly. Although I had his son on, and we saw some weird stuff. Actually, I had Ryan Bledsoe on, and yeah, we saw some. I'd say some very strange things, some things that I've never seen before with his son, and apparently they both take people out, and they'll look up into the sky for hours on end, and they'll attempt to summon them so that you can have an experience. And we saw a couple of weird things with Ryan. One was 3 objects, what kind of looked like stars, like or what would look like satellites. They were moving, and they were flying in a triangle formation. And so that was weird because I've seen tons of satellites. I look up all the time, constantly, and you always see it between 6 and 8 p.m. basically as the sun is going down, and we were within that window where the sun is shining directly, up, and you can kind of see the reflection on any objects that are up there, and most of the times it's satellites, but you never see, they didn't break formation at all. And you never see that with satellites. Satellites is always like one going this way and another going this way and another's coming down this way. These were 3 that were flying in formation with each other, and then they just kind of disappeared. And so that was strange. I'd never seen anything like that. And
I saw one when we were camping last summer. Actually, I saw a satellite-looking thing take a complete right-angle turn.
really,
And the funny thing is, like, I even like doubt my memory now. Like, even after it happened, I was like, "There's no way that just happened." And I like started telling my friends, and they were just kind of like rolling their eyes. I'm like, "Guys, like,
wow.
But now I'm just like, did it happen? But I definitely did see it happen. But who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
That's
that's the only event I've ever seen that was strange.
That's a powerful experience. For
Who
sure.
knows?
Sure.
Who the heck knows?
You're one of, one of few. I feel like a lot of people have seen weird stuff, but it's like nobody really kind of talks about it. Like nobody really puts it out there, and but yeah,
Well, it's
that's
weird
really
because
cool.
like your perceptions are fallible, and your memory is fallible, and it's hard to believe in things that you can't explain immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. Experience doesn't require belief, I mean, that's the big thing. Experience is an experience. But did other people see it with you, or were you the only person looking at it?
I was
All
the
of
only.
us were looking at the sky, and Shiloh's the only one who saw it.
Okay.
Well, we were looking at different parts of the sky.
I'm not. I didn't. I'm not disparaging your
There was
view.
three of
No.
us.
Yeah.
We were looking at different quadrants.
But that's one thing that makes it more real. And that, like, if somebody else has seen it, like, if somebody else saw the same thing that you saw, then it's easier to not doubt yourself, for sure, if you've got multiple people that see it. And there were four of us that saw 4 or 5 of us that saw these three flying in formation. Very, very strange. But yeah, I mean, there's some interesting stuff up there, man. You just got to look.
Yeah, I mean, I think that applies to a lot of things. What do you say?
Hey guys, pardon the interruption. I need to ask you for a favor. If you have not done so already, please consider making sure that we have the power to keep this project going. You can give as little as 75 cents a week and become a patron over at patreon.com/DemystifySci. And it would mean all the world to us, as those little donations add up to making sure we can put more and more of our time and energy towards this project. So I'll see you there, patreon.com/DemystifySci. Thanks.
I wonder if before we move on to Kurt Cobain, which is very interesting, we could briefly cover nuclear explosions on Mars, as opposed to looping back to it at the end.
Okay, I'm not the expert there, but happy to opine. I think that there's like a decent, like, normal explanation for why it looks like there's been nuclear explosions on Mars. Now, Mars is interesting though, because there's all of these, like, the face on Mars. You guys are familiar with the face on Mars, and like that square, or I guess it's a rectangle, that was recently, like, photographed, and like that thing's weird, and the pyramids in Cydonia, like, I mean, Mars used to have oceans, right? So I mean, life on Mars, we know that in the past that there used to be life on Mars. So what happened to it? Where did it go? I mean, I think that's a legitimate enough question. The face on Mars thing is weird to me because of the 3 photographs that NASA has shown us, where it looks like a total, like, Photoshop on the first one from when was it? Like 1998, maybe, something like that. And
I remember it from the X-Files, actually. It's like on one of the posters on Mulder's walls.
And wasn't
Right.
it also, there was a movie that, am I just totally imagining that there was a movie about, like, a face on Mars in the 90s as well? Like
I'm
some
not sure.
sci-fi movie?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Wait, did you just say that we know that there was life on Mars in the past?
Yeah, don't we know that? Isn't that a fact now at this point? I thought we found like
There's
I mean,
some weird stuff they've been finding, like these sulfur inclusions. I think that people generally in the mainstream suspect that there may have been life. I don't think there's any unambiguous proof of that at this point.
People have literally been fighting tooth and nail about whether or not that's...
Well, it's worth pointing out that until the 70s, it was a foregone conclusion, essentially.
Yeah, it was a foregone. I've said this before on the podcast. So when we sent the first landers to Mars, there was still this sense that we might land on Mars and discover, like, a verdant planet that currently had life on it. And it was just this...
Because it has this seasonal color change, right? People thought it was greening seasonally. It turned out it definitely is wetter and so forth. But it has nothing to do with trees or anything like that, unfortunately.
My most intuitive and unfounded opinion about the origin of life is that planets just make it as they cool. And so at some point there is just a transition between the atoms of the planet that get cold enough that then start to coalesce in some kind of really, really simple goal-directed system that eventually over time evolves. And so I think that there's not really a privilege to life, period. It seems like it's probably something that happens on every rock that's big enough and hot enough and has, like, the right chemical composition. The question is, do you have a planetary surface that is amenable to developing complex life? And
Mhm.
so the question is, was there complex life on Mars? Like, were there trees? Were there grasses? Were there, Martian octopi and Martians? And
Mhm.
that, I think, is still, I think that's just really impossible to tell. Like, time's a bitch. And so billions of years of weathering and everything else that have happened since it was supposedly verdant would have erased basically anything down to just raw atoms.
Mhm. Yeah, that
Four,
makes sense for sure.
four faces and pyramids.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, the face thing is weird. It was 1976 where the first time that the face photo was shown, and it was like this perfectly clear, beautiful face, and like it looked like it was like a man-made structure. And then 1998, they released a second photograph of it, and it's like it was clearly photoshopped. It's like 13 layers of Photoshop on this thing, and so everybody was all pissed off. Like, what, this isn't what we saw in the 1976 photograph, and why did it take 22 years for you to show us another photograph? And so they released
Wait. So this photoshopped one looks crappier than the original one? Is that
way
what you're
crap,
saying?
way crappy.
I see. I
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, Ryan, can you pull that up, and or actually, if you can send it over. I'm not sure if you guys will be able to see it if Ryan pulls it up right now on our
We
end.
might be able to. You want to test it
Yep.
out?
Yeah, let's try it.
Also, I looked, and the movie was Mission to Mars from the
Oh, okay,
2000s,
sure.
and the face on Mars played a very important role in that movie. I remember nothing except for the face.
Okay, okay.
I think Don Cheadle was in it.
Yep.
Ooh, okay, let's see. Huh.
So this is interesting because it's clearly 98 was clearly photoshopped. I don't think that there's a discussion or debate about that, but it's like there's like a single indentation where the eyes would have been in 1998. And then it looks like they realized they went way too far with the Photoshop, and then they built it back up in 2001, because it's unless they went in with bulldozers and like reshape the ground, it's not it's not the same. It's not the same thing. It's not the same photograph.
How far away are we from actually being able to send some orbiter that doesn't go through a government to be able to actually look at the surface of
Right.
another planet? Do you know?
No, I don't know. I mean, and even if I think the government's gonna have their hand in it regardless, right? Like, I mean, they're gonna figure out a way to show the gen pop whatever they want to show the gen pop. It's frustrating because, like, I mean, we've got rovers on Mars that could easily explore that region of Mars, the Cydonia region, and really figure this out. I mean, it would be super easy to get like satellite images of that area, and actually get hundreds of pictures of the face on Mars and see what it actually looks like. But nobody's doing it, and it's like NASA's not doing it, and so we're left to wonder, well, why? Why, if people are interested in this, like, why wouldn't you photograph it? Why won't you show us what it actually looks like? And they're just kind of dismissing the whole thing as not important or not interesting. And I think a lot of people still think that that's a little bit sketchy. But
Does Ryan have pictures of that rectangle that they found recently?
I'm not sure. Ryan,
The
you can probably
pyramid?
find it. Sure.
They found like a rectangular foundation looking thing. It wasn't a pyramid. It literally looked like the edge of a building that had once been there. And it's like fairly large and very anomalously rectangular. If Ryan doesn't have it, I can pull
There
it
it is.
up. Like, look at that. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, that's just unbelievable. There's like a piece cut out on the one on the right. Do you know what that is?
I don't know why it looks like it's cut out and then slid to the right or something, but the image on the left is the main image of the. I mean, that's very strange to have that form naturally.
Yeah. Wow. So we started this with you saying that there might be a different explanation for what looks like an evidence of nuclear explosions on Mars that is not somebody setting off nuclear bombs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't look. I don't know. That's beyond my area of knowledge. But I think that it looks like when you measure the isotopes within the soil that it was like a nuclear holocaust. But I think you can probably explain that through meteor impacts and like cosmic impacts over billions of years is kind of the only, I guess, my only thoughts or point there. I mean, you know. I think if the only explanation was nuclear fallout, then it would be a bigger story than it is.
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of this stuff is really interesting because it is passed through so many different hands before it gets to you, right? Like, if you are interested in geopolymers or in ancient archaeology or the vases, you can go and you can look at the vases in a museum. You can go to these sites and you can kind of see the way that it all fits together for yourself. When it
Mhm.
comes to things on the moon, when it comes to things on Mars, all of a sudden it becomes a really filtered experience where you actually can't see anything. Everything that's handed to you is handed through some kind of massive state program that's like, okay, well, this is from the billions of images that we've taken. This is what you have. And so I think that that lends itself always to people openly wondering, like, what are the stories that aren't being told? Because there's clearly an Overton window of the things that are within the realm of accepted possibility.
Mhm.
And yet we know that there's things that lie outside of that as well. And so just how far outside is a reasonable place to rest your priors on? I think that that's a hard thing to figure out.
Mhm.
But it's
Yep.
very interesting. Science is the same way. Like we do this on the show all the time where it's like people will come up with theories. One of my favorite ones recently is expanding Earth. It's the idea that the Earth was about like 25% smaller at some point. And it seems totally insane when you first hear about it, but then you start looking into the mechanics of plate tectonics, the various mechanisms that are available for whether or not the mantle convection is capable of moving the plates of the Earth. Like, why are the ocean floors only 200 to 400 million years old if they've been around since basically the birth of the world and the continents have just been sliding around on them?
Mhm.
And I think that there's just a realm of things that are comfortable to accept so you can move on from them. Because there is a madness that comes with nothing being fixed. Like, if everything is up for debate, that is, on one hand, a really vibrant time to be alive. And I think it's maybe one of the most exciting times to be alive. But on the other hand, you have to recognize that it topples the structures that have come up with the stories for generations.
Mhm. Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Do you guys want to talk about? You mentioned Earth. I've got a crazy conspiracy about Earth. As long as you guys are interested in
Let's
conspiracy,
go. Let's
all right,
go.
Let's do it.
let's do it. Let's do it. So, yeah, I created Ryan and I actually. Ryan, if you can pull up Google Earth, I did a podcast on this just because it was something that looking at Google Earth, it just jumps out as like what is the true history of the planet Earth. And um, if you look at like North America and South America, and you look at kind of the west coast of every continent, you see what looks like a massive amount of water damage, like saltwater damage. That it looks like water has crashed into the west coast of every major continent. And so you see this, like, you guys seeing this?
Oh yeah, we got a picture here.
All right, all right. So this is wild. I mean, if you look at like the west coast of the United States, and you imagine like if the Earth's rotation had slowed down for just a brief period of time, and then what would happen? Well, the Earth is spinning from west to east at about 1,000 miles per hour, and so if the Earth's rotation were to ever slow down, the momentum of the wind and the water would continue from west to east, and you would have water crashing onto the west coast of every major continent on Earth. And when water crashes onto land, when salt water, it's going to create salinization. It's going to create desert, and we see that. We see that in the United States. But not only do we see that on the west coast of the United States, we also see all of these salt deposits on the United States, and we see what looks like like what would be like ripples in from water crashing on, and so all of that is salt. It's like that's where, and it's all at the lowest points of the of like elevation. This is all at the lowest point. So like the Great Salt Lake and all of that salt to the left of it, that is where the if this hypothetical event were to have ever happened, that's where all of the ocean water would have settled. And so, you look at like just the United States and you look at all this salt and you're like, oh my God, what if this event actually happened? And then you scroll, let's scroll down to like, yeah, South America is fine. You get the same thing on the west coast of South America where you've got this massive salt flat right there. And you've got all of these ripples, almost as if the land to the right, yeah, right there, almost as if the land to the right was being, like pushed on by the water that was like, it was being, like the water was coming up onto the land and kind of created these like stretch marks almost, or these ripple marks on the west coast. You can kind of go up and down basically from North America to the bottom part of South America and see evidence for this event. Yeah, so go down farther, yeah, into like the southern tip, and you see, zoom out a little bit. You see where, like, if the water was coming from the west to the east, how any all of this land would have been pushed
Mm.
out into the ocean, like sort of like spread out and stretched out into the ocean. And then, yeah, that little thumb, that little nub, that thing and the angle that is going, it basically, if you draw a circle, you continue that angle, it goes right around Antarctica, and so like if you zoom out on Antarctica, Ryan, and you can kind of see, and then zoom all the way out, you can kind of follow that around. It would really, that's the way that if the Earth's rotation did slow down and there was land there at some point in time connecting South America to Antarctica, it would have pushed all of this stuff to the right. And so super, super interesting and super
Hmm.
compelling. And up, if you go into like the
And I to interrupt you just for a second, that
yeah, yeah,
view of
please.
Antarctica,
Yeah.
there's actually there's a join that goes all the way around Antarctica. Like it's on its own plate, and all of the oceanic plates interface north of it. And
Mm.
so it's like if there is some kind of massive crustal event that the poles remain stable during, you would expect to see exactly that kind of like circular cracking around it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Have you read Hapgood's book?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah.
I
Yep.
always found that to be like just first of all, it's a beautiful book just to read, but I always found the idea like super intriguing.
Yep.
The stories he tells about the what is it, the mastodon with the
The buttercup's still in its stomach.
there you go, yeah, they're eating these summer plants and somehow just frozen solid instantaneously. It's very strange.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's fascinating for sure. Yeah. Yes,
Does it extend also to the west coast of Africa?
it does. Yeah. Yeah. You want to pull that up. It's pretty cool. And you look at like all of that ocean water up there in the northern Pacific Ocean. I'm sorry, Atlantic Ocean. It would have gone into like the Mediterranean Sea, but and then, potentially back out to the west. But if you look at that, I mean, obviously 100% desert up there, but all of those striations that you see are they're the mainstream answer for why those exist is wind in the sand. And maybe Ryan, maybe if you go to the right and show some of the like how it goes around the volcano up a little bit. Yeah, so you can imagine water just pouring through there. Yeah, right there. And I mean, you see those striations all over northern Africa, but you also see salt deposits. If you go into like Imikusi, then you can see that there's like salt deposits that are like 12,000 feet above sea level at the top of a volcano. And I think, in this crazy, yeah, there's some more salt deposits. right there. Yeah, there you go.
Ugh.
So look at that. Like, I mean, that's pretty interesting, right? You're 12,000 feet above sea level right there. I'm sure there's some explanation for why all of that exists, but you
And
know,
that's salt? That's not ice?
correct. Yeah, that's not ice. It's salt.
The old icy Sahara.
Yeah,
Well, you could have I mean,
well,
if
it's
it's
hot.
at 12,000 feet above sea level,
I mean, one of the
Yeah.
things that's always stood out to me, I do a lecture on this for my astronomy course at the university too, and the bizarre fact that the ice caps during the last glaciation were centered over Greenland, not over the North Pole. I always thought that was like one of the weirdest pieces. One of our friends, I'm not going to
Vance
say where
Weaver.
he works for a particular geological state institution, but he actually brought that to our attention, and he's done some incredible animations and illustrations of this. But it's very bizarre because the standard story that it just kind of got cold, and that's why we have these glaciations, isn't totally. It's really not congruent with the fact that it was nice in Siberia all of a sudden, and if you look at where those depressions from those ice caps are, they're reaching down into Wisconsin, right? They're actually centered over Greenland, not over the North Pole, which is really, really bizarre.
Mhm.
And for me, it kind of opens a new possibility on the Hapgood idea.
well,
Mhm.
and the fact that Siberia during the last ice age wasn't as cold as it is now. Like,
Mm.
the glaciers did not go down into Siberia. And
That's
so
what I'm
if the
saying, yeah.
model of the Earth is that it just cold reaches from the top down towards the warmer meridians is not accurate, then something insane happened that's
Mhm.
just completely outside of the realm of possibility. Because I think that the era of, hey, the crust might slip and could destroy everything that we have ever built is the era of like death cults and full Mad Max chaos. I think you have nothing left to do except to throw virgins into volcanoes at that point. Like, that's just, it's like the future arc of civilization.
Yeah, that's the only logical thing to do at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like pure ceremony and pomp and circumstance.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a wild one. I mean, and you can go over every continent on Earth and look at the West Coast, and it looks like you've got like that water moved over Australia. It looks like water went through the Middle East, like over Iraq, Iran. It looks like it went over Northern Africa on the West Coast of both of the North and South America. And then there's these like what is it, the Dead Sea or the Red Sea, that's like 30% salt water, which is between two mountain ranges. And so if you ever had ocean water, thousands and thousands of years ago, that would have dissolved and left something at the base of it, it would probably be about 30% salt at this point in time. So it's interesting. It's super compelling. It gets into crazy conspiracy world, but I think that one is as long as we're talking wacky wild stuff on this podcast, that one seems like it's worth bringing up, just because of like geologically, now that we have Google Earth and we don't look at things like just from the ground level and just like isolated incident by area by area. If we're looking at like potentially global catastrophes that could have occurred in the ancient past, I think that's one that's worth like kind of trying to understand and to look at as a possibility. Um,
I
and
think
I,
you
and
got to
I
understand too that when these paradigms were set up in terms of the history of the surface of our Earth, there was this huge backlash against catastrophism, right? Because it was generally this radical religious minority that was arguing for these very abrupt changes that resulted in the surface features of the Earth. And so the kind of backlash to that was this uniformitarian gradualism. And so the stories that we've inherited tend to, and this extends to the entire solar system as far as I can tell. It's this very gentle process of things kind of formed more or less as they are. Don't worry, things will continue this way until the heat death of the universe, but I think that that's in almost all of these planetary sciences becoming wildly untenable. And it's just a matter of whether or not people will get on the same page about what sort of abrupt changes actually resulted in the particular landscapes that we have. Like we had this super well-renowned, established planetary scientist from Columbia. What was her name? Dallas Abbott. And this lady saw mega tsunamis everywhere, right? Like she was looking at the coast just like this, and she was just completely convinced that there's just huge tsunamis going on all throughout the last, 10,000 years, but going back before that. And she blamed a lot of those on bolides, but it really opened my eyes up to the fact that, when you have a different approach for analyzing a particular situation, you can come up with a very, very different story for how that particular appearance came to be, right? And we get so locked into like our mono narratives about any particular feature. But man, looking at the past is one of those weird sciences where, unlike biology, we can't set up test tubes, right? You can't just run the Earth two different ways and see which one works out. I mean, you can do simulations, but maybe you forgot a variable. Maybe you overemphasized a different variable. It's just very, very hard to do the controlled kind of scientific method that we've come to believe in technologically, at least in this era, on the deep past. And especially when you start talking about things millions and billions of years ago, it's just, I mean, the error bars on whatever you're proposing have to be enormous. And it's an uncomfortable thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's really well said and spot on. Yeah, the gradualism thing versus the catastrophism. It's like, it's been like that's been the mainstream view of things, is this gradualistic viewpoint, and nothing interesting or catastrophic has ever happened in Earth's history. Essentially. I mean, and it's like it's ridiculous, and that's, I think, why people struggle, like modern science struggles so much with exploring the Younger Dryas, that time period, and whether or not there was a catastrophe, 11,600 years ago, 12,800 years ago. That epoch of time was marked by just massive extinctions, like the saber-toothed tiger, the woolly mammoth, the short-faced bear, all of these huge megafauna. I want to say like 100 different species of these massive mammals that were, like all went extinct basically right at the same time period. And there were also huge changes in sea level, and there were huge changes in global temperature. And to think that nothing happened to cause that, or that it was just like natural, slow climate change, or the best excuse or the best reason is overhunting, that humans were overhunting.
I heard that one just yesterday.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's completely insane. It's super conspiratorial to think that humans, when we were going through a bottleneck of our own, where what could overhunt, like you're talking about predators. Short-faced bear was up to 8 feet tall, with like, I mean, this is the ultimate killing machine. And to think that we could go find everyone in every cave all across the planet and make them go extinct, all at the same time that the woolly mammoth was dying, and all these like tigers and lions were dying. I mean, something like 75 to 80% of mammals in North America went extinct in that period of time. And I think that it's very, very clear and very obvious that there was a catastrophe that happened on a global scale at that period of time. And I think that that's like the Comet research group who's studying that the potential for an impact, and do the Carolina bays factor into that? I don't know if you guys are familiar with them. There's like several 100,000 of these elliptical shaped ground depressions that all orient right towards the Great Lakes region. And if some comet impacted the Great Lakes region and created the Michigan Basin and sent ice and water flying in all different directions, that would be what we had. We would have all these Carolina bays, all over up and down the East Coast of the United States. And so I think that I'm with you. It's silly to think that nothing interesting has ever happened in our past, and that that all of these animals just went extinct, by overhunting, or by there's not really a good explanation for that time period and kind of what happened there. So, I mean, people like Randall and the Comet Research Group. I think that they're really going to be they're hated by mainstream historians and geologists and archaeologists. But I think at the end of the day, science advances one death at a time. That group of people is going to be proven right as it relates to that time period, and we'll end up learning a lot more about our history and kind of some of the big events that have shaped the Earth.
Or one asteroid at a time, as the
Yeah.
case may be.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that there is a really interesting sociological effect with this kind of outsider research. And it hasn't made it into the history of science for most college students, unfortunately. But I don't think these huge updates to our understanding of natural processes usually come from within some discipline. And that's often overlooked, right? Darwin, he went to seminary school, right? He was a guy who was not part of the academic geological tradition of the day. And he had a crazy idea, and he worked on it his whole life, basically up to the point that he thought he was going to get scooped by somebody else, who was Wallace at the time. And he publishes it. Copernicus is kind of the same way with, the whole revolution with heliocentrism and everything. Thomas Young and light, the wave nature of light. The guy was a physician, right? It often takes that external perspective to even see something that's so glaringly obvious, because when you're working in those disciplines, you could just become completely acquainted with a standard story, and everything that you see is colored through that lens. And so I think that I would call it like the Graham Hancock effect with the Younger Dryas stuff. It's almost this pushback against outsiders on their face, right? It's not like Graham is perfect or Randall or any of these people are perfect, but neither are establishment scientists, right? It's totally fine to botch a theory or details of theories and revisit them and move on. But there's something about the emotional response to this group of outsiders, which to me, actually gives them some credence, gives the ideas some credence.
Yeah, I mean, I've always treated it as being an immune system process, where there is the establishment that has defenses against a threat to its body. And I think that a lot of what we're trying to do on the podcast is to sneak past those defenses, to be like, hey, we're not threatening anybody. This is fine. Whatever you've done is valuable work. Especially when it comes to techniques and tools and the cataloging of sites. There's so much work that's been done that's so valuable for the people that are looking at the data now and are like, well, hold on a second. There's a different story that we can tell, where I feel like a certain amount of reverence is necessary, and also to be able to say that you can't behave this way. You don't own these ideas. You don't have the sole right of telling the story of all of time just because you have a piece of paper that has some letters on it.
Mm-hmm.
The information tells a story, and treating science as anything except for a story is silly, because it's going to change. And so if you hold on to it in such a way where you're like, well, this story is the final truth and we have figured it out, you inevitably put yourself into a corner where you have to start to take little pieces of reality away, because you're like, oh, well, we've already told the story, and so we can't look at this other piece. And that seems to be a spiritually dangerous place to be in, and good guys don't do that. So, and
this is why I hate Nobel Prizes so much, because I'm like, you guys are backing yourselves into a corner that you don't want to be doing, right? I mean, the entire principle from freshman science course in high school is that science is a constantly updating perspective on the nature of reality. It's the last thing you want to do is to just nail your feet to the floor on anything.
Yeah, and I think that it's really hard on both sides, though, because I've noticed that people that are heterodox thinkers or fringe thinkers will often dismiss features of reality that warrant explaining, but that their theory might not actually totally explain. And they're like, well, we don't have to explain that. I remember we had a guy on the show a long time ago who was talking about the structure of the nucleus. And we do a lot of physics, and so this was a presentation on the idea that all atoms were built from the simplest building block, which is hydrogen. And so you have these various shapes that come out of those interactions that produce the entire periodic table. Plausible, interesting. And then we were like, okay, well, how do you deal with spin? which is like a property of certain subatomic phenomena. And he's like, oh, I don't deal with spin. And I'm like,
I just
I don't-
ignore that part.
yeah, I'm like, I don't think you can't do that inside of the academy. You can't do it on the outside of the academy. And so,
It was equally cringe when Newton said he didn't have to deal with the cause of gravity.
yeah, I'm just sort of like, I think that there is an ethos that emerges through these conversations about what ideas are possible, from which we can derive some basic principles of logic and rhetoric and honesty that's going to be the future. Where we look back on the past of science and we're like, okay, this is a thing we've only been doing for a few hundred years. Like we've really the space of explanatory power is, I don't know, from the 1600s maybe. The idea that we've like worked out the best way to do it and that we found the best place for it in society and we figured out what parts of it we can really lean on in crisis versus which parts of it we can't is kind of absurd because we've never been in a society that does science. Like I constantly am just thrown for a loop when I think about how absurd it is, how insane for us to have come up with this idea of like, we're going to try to explain nature and not say that gods did it. It's like, what? That's insane. Every single human iteration for its entire track record has been about the fact that gods did stuff.
Mhm.
And you think that in the couple hundred years, we've like figured out how to appropriately place that in society to be able to know what parts to lean on? Like, that's insane. We've never tested it. We have no idea. Like, we thought that heat was like a fluid that could just pass through all of matter like 100 years ago, 150 years ago. Like, we're so new at this. And
Totally.
so watching people walk around and say, well, we figured it out. I'm like, I don't think you have.
Yeah. Well, that's why podcasts like this are so important, right? So that we can keep putting pressure on things and kind of keep questioning things and keep attempting to like bring new ideas and alternative ideas and new ways of thinking. Because if we don't, yeah, those people who think that they have everything figured out and who have that final chapter of the book of this is how everything works and we know the truth and here and we're the keepers of the knowledge. Yeah, you got to question those people, man, and question motives. And it's like it's belief versus truth. It's like it's belief versus reality, and um, we don't know everything, and we never will know everything. And so it's like that continuous exploration of the truth is just critical for everybody to just keep an open mind and again, like not take things to 100%. And when we take things to like beliefs to 100% or fact, we're just limiting ourselves, and everything is based on some former thing or some former study. Like we're building on top of building on top of building, and it's like this house of cards that it always crashes eventually, because like if one thing has a 98% chance of being true and we're using that 98% chance of being true, somebody won a Nobel Prize on it, and then something else, the next thing has a 90% chance of being true, and the next thing has a 70% chance of being true. Well, if you're building on top of building on top of building, you have to multiply those percentages by each other to get to the percentage of the most recent thing that you're attempting to prove. So it's like 98 times 90 times 76. You're at like I got a coin flip here. It's like I'm mathematically, I think that we start to realize over time that as we build on top of building on top of building, we're not really coming up with the answer. We're just kind of entrenching our minds into the current existing theory without questioning the whole thing. And the only way to really progress and to move forward is to have those alternative ideas that are outside of this matrix of ideas. And if it would be one thing if like there were no mysteries within this matrix and everything made complete sense, but it doesn't. It doesn't all make sense, and it can't all be explained. I mean, even gravity is like. It's an illusion I mean, mathematically it breaks down when you look at Mercury moving around the sun. It doesn't work, right? So, I mean, it's like a formula that, yeah, I mean, it's not, it doesn't totally, the whole matrix of ideas is just needs to constantly be questioned, and constantly, it always gets updated, and people are constantly being proven wrong. And, I think
I
that's why.
think history will show that like what's going on at these podcast spaces. Like I'm trying really hard not to pat myself on the back here, but what you're doing at your channel, what a lot of people are doing, I think is a natural instinct that emerges from the reality, which is that the way of sharing scientific ideas and theories about the world and nature kind of broke down over the last 70 so years, let's say, since being a career scientist was a thing after World War II. And you saw the privatization of the published research, and you just see the whole thing just kind of start to molder a little bit, right? And it makes sense to me that whereas science kind of began as this correspondence system between thinkers who were trying to understand basic phenomena, and they were actually writing letters to each other, right? Often via the Royal Society or something like that. That as that kind of degrades into this privatized industry of sorts that's state-sponsored and just gets narrower and more brittle, it makes sense that there would be a natural reaction, like these open discussions that are just proliferating all over the internet. There's got to be thousands of these kind of podcasts where theorists or thinkers are just working out ideas in real time, which is really what people were doing in those letter writing societies from the 17th, 18th century. And so it kind of, I think of what we are trying to do with this project is kind of bigger than a podcast in a sense. Like that is a part of what we're doing, but we're really trying to like reconnect theorists with one another and actually kind of build this bridging network system where these ideas can foment and people can really hash it out, and that's one of the reasons why we're turning to doing live events too, because we really want to bring people together to take walks on the beach, in the spirit of those olden days when people weren't just completely married to a unified conception of how things should work. They were really willing to explore possibilities without committing to them. And so I hope and I believe that in retrospect, this landscape, this, what appears to be an entertainment sphere of podcasts, will prove to be something much greater than that, actually.
Well said. Yeah. No, well said for sure. No, it's a great mission, and it's like it's great purpose, and it has the potential to change the world. So, no, totally agree.
And include people in changing the world too, like regular people, right? Yeah. Not just specialized people who've devoted their lives to partial differential equations or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it's almost more difficult to change the world from inside the establishment, than it is to like break things up and shake things up from outside of it, for sure. So yeah, no, you're totally right. Love that.
So,
Cobain.
Kurt was a huge part of my childhood. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I still love playing overdriven electric guitars in my spare time. So yeah, let's talk about this. I read, well, it all kind of happened. Kurt's death happened when I was, just turning from a child into a teenager. And yeah, it really felt like this.
The end of an era.
Yeah, it felt like the end of something that I'd kind of just missed in my own life. Like I was too young to really be like going to concerts and stuff during like the height of the grunge era. But it seemed like something really cool had happened, like analogous to maybe the 1960s with the psychedelic rock movement and Jimi Hendrix and the Doors and all that. But yeah, it just ground to a halt with Kurt's death. And I remember, I think I read a book about Kurt's death around that same time. And I remember reading like the suicide letter and all the forensic reports and all that, kind of like this helter-skelter type reproduction of it. And I was just deeply unsatisfied. So I'm very, very interested to hear that you might have happened upon a very different perspective than the standard narrative we've been introduced to.
Yeah, for sure. Do you mind me asking what were you, about 1980 when you were born? And
I was born in 82. It's actually my birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday. That's awesome. That's really cool. Happy birthday.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah, I was born in 1978, and so I guess I was 16 when it happened. And yeah, I'm with you, man. Like Tupac and Kurt Cobain. I was obsessed with Tupac, but I was like a product of the 90s. 90s music was the best music that we've had since the 60s, and Kurt was a big part of that.
I think we can objectively agree that's a fact as well.
Yeah, yeah.
It needs no theoretical validation.
Right. Yeah, we don't need science to help us with that one. Yeah, it's it was. I didn't like think anything of Kurt Cobain's suicide until I watched Soaked in Bleach. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that documentary. Okay, I'd highly recommend if you're interested. If you're a Kurt fan, Soaked in Bleach is a phenomenal documentary, and a guy named Tom Grant was was kind of the star of that documentary. It's on Netflix, and yeah, Tom was the private investigator who was hired by Courtney Love to investigate her missing husband, Kurt Cobain. And so he created this documentary, and he's 100% plus convinced that Kurt was murdered. And so I watched that documentary and was blown away, like absolutely blown away by the evidence and in that documentary, and became convinced that there's something here. It's at least worth looking into, because this is not a clear cut case of suicide. And so I had Tom Grant on my show. I actually had him on twice, and we talked about it, and I became more convinced that there was something there. But I also became convinced that Tom was not going to be the person who could help me do anything about it. And so what I like to do on the show is get to next and fix things and like find out truth and make progress. And so that's kind of, on the vases, it was easy to say, hey, I'm going to go buy a bunch of these and learn about them and provide that information to the public. On the Kurt Cobain thing, it was like, I've kind of picked my lane twice now, one with the vases and two with Cobain, and I want to try to make a difference and get this thing sort of re-looked at. And so I decided to do that, and so I teamed up with a person named Michelle Wilkins. Michelle is the head honcho at WhoKilledKurt.org. And she's a brilliant person, and I did a podcast with her, and actually two now. I did one last week with her as well, where we've kind of updated people about what's going on now. But I did one about a year ago with her and met her, and it was about the time that Joe Burns was coming out as a witness to this case. Are you guys familiar with Joe Burns and who? Okay, so
yeah, let's just assume we know nothing about it.
Okay. Yeah. There's so much to this case, and we could never possibly touch on all of the details, but I'm happy to try to touch on as much as humanly possible and provide some of the evidence for why we don't think that this was a suicide. And it's one of those things that, like, the more you look into this, the more it doesn't look like a suicide, the more it looks like there's foul play involved here. And so,
can we give people the orthodox story and then start to pick it apart where it falls apart most readily?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the orthodox story is that Kurt was suicidal and was a suicidal drug addict, and he took his own life. And there was he was in Rome with Courtney a month before he died, and he actually in Rome. They called it an accident after it happened, but he actually overdosed in Rome on rohypnol. It was put into his drinks. He was drinking that night with Courtney. They were having wine. It was from Courtney's prescription of, it's like the date rape drug is what that is. And he had to go to the hospital. He almost died. She didn't call the.
Why did Courtney have a date rape prescription?
Right. Yeah. I mean, this was like 90s grunge. Everybody's a drug addict, but yeah, she got that prescription, and it made its way into Kurt's drinks. And Kurt was trying to leave Courtney at this point in time. He was in the process of leaving Courtney, and he wanted Francis he wanted to take custody of Francis, and there's questions about whether or not he was also planning on leaving Nirvana and kind of starting his own thing. But that's kind of what happened. My best guess is that was also a murder attempt in Rome. That was an attempt to take Kurt's life, and he got back to the United States, and And then there was the second attempt, but it was a successful attempt this time. And so I'll get to that in a second. But basically, what happened with Joe Burns is Joe Burns came forward and talked to Joe Burns is the witness, claims that he was at the house the night that Kurt was murdered. And he says that he was there. He names other people that were there. Several people have actually also died that were there that night. If you look at and several people have died mysteriously from in and around their inner circle, like Kristen Pfaff. She was the bassist for Hole. She was a bandmate of Courtney Love's, and she was found in a bathtub about a month after Kurt died, 3 or 4 weeks after Kurt died, and she also died of a heroin overdose. And so, was that a murder, or was that an accidental overdose, as they say it was? There's more, but Joe came out and said, "Look, I was at the house the night that Kurt was murdered. We were all partying. We'd been there for several days. I was there with my girlfriend Bonnie. We know who Bonnie is. She lives in Seattle, or she lives in San Francisco now. If we do get this case open, which I'm very optimistic that we'll get this case open, all of these people are going to be called in and questioned by police to really get their perspective of what happened that night. But Joe has come out and said that Dylan Carlson, who was like, I don't know if you guys know Dylan Carlson, but he's like he was on that scene, and he was like friends with Courtney, and 2 other guys came and led Kurt up against his will to the greenhouse. Essentially, the greenhouse was this building above the garage, and that about 20 minutes later, they heard the gunshot go off, and they were kind of ushered out and told to leave. So that's kind of the story from Joe. And Joe has been questioned now by my attorney. I've actually got an attorney hired for Joe, so he's got a defense attorney. So he's ready to go. He just needs to stay alive for a couple more months. And we're going to get. I'm very optimistic that we're going to get this case reopened. I've got an attorney working on it. This is the first time that an attorney has ever been involved with gathering information, talking to the people that were there, talking to the people that that were in and around the situation, and presenting the evidence to the authorities so that they can make a decision on what happened and whether or not they want to reopen the case.
So
I'll pause there.
yeah, I listened to, there was a guy who's either a reporter or some true crime guy, and he Matthew Cox has a podcast. Remember that?
Yep, he's a friend of mine. Yeah.
Okay, he was on Lex. We listened to him. It was like the 8-hour-long podcast about the guy who is.
I loved that one.
So he has his own podcast now, and he did an episode about this, and it was before you released your podcast about it. So I listened to that one because that was the longest one that was available, and he kind of laid out the story where Kurt comes back from tour or playing a show, or he's been traveling, and so he comes back to his house, and there's people that are partying at the house. And Kurt wants them to leave. And at some point, he tells them to leave, but nobody leaves. And then he ends up in the greenhouse, and then there's the gunshot. And then nobody finds his body for a few days.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 days or something like that.
So to me, that's the craziest part. So people are at the house, and there's a gunshot. Kurt goes missing, and then it's just... Nobody goes to check?
Nope, nobody was questioned. So it was ruled a suicide that day. I mean, there was no investigation done on this thing to determine whether or not there was any kind of foul play. It was ruled a suicide the same day. They never reached out to anybody at the house. They never reached out to Joe Burns, to Bonnie, to anybody that was there. Macaulay Culkin's half sister, I forget what her name is, Jennifer something, was there. She mysteriously died of a heroin overdose as well. A few years later, after this thing happened, her mom strongly suspected that she was murdered, and she went to Seattle to attempt to get an investigation done about her daughter. The mom then died, and she was killed by a car. She got T-boned by a car. This other guy, El Duce, who was on the rock scene, who was like close to them. He came out and said that Courtney Love offered him $50,000 to whack Kurt Cobain. Some interview reporter guy went to his house and interviewed him, and he's like, "Yeah, Courtney offered me $50,000 to whack Kurt Cobain," and he was, he's completely serious, and it was like, told the story, and
Was he like a known assassin or something?
no, he was just like somebody that could have used 50 grand, I guess. But he turned it down. He was doing a gig. He said he was like
busy.
Yeah, he was busy, right? He couldn't get it done. And so he died. He got hit by a train. A couple of like 3 weeks after, 2 or 3 weeks after he came out and said all this and did the interview. He's dead. He got decapitated by a train. So very, very strange, the number of people that have like had like either overdoses or violent deaths that have been involved in investigating this case, or been involved in this case rather. So yeah, I mean, all kinds of just strange things. The suicide note, quote unquote suicide note, very likely was not a suicide note at all. It was the top 3/4 of it was a note that Kurt had written. We think that it was a note that Kurt had written probably a year prior to him being murdered, and the bottom quarter of the note was we don't think he wrote it. At the house of the Cobain attorney, her name is Rosemary Carroll. Courtney left a backpack, and in that backpack there were practice handwriting notes that were like practicing Kurt's handwriting, and she found him in this backpack. And this guy, Tom Grant, the private investigator, has like recorded a conversation with Rosemary Carroll, who's still alive, who's again going to be one of those people that we name in this case as somebody who needs to be called to testify. And so, I mean, it sounds like the craziest conspiracy theory stuff that you've ever heard, but it's like, if there's any amount of truth to this, this is not a open and shut case of suicide.
That letter is really weird. If
really
people
weird,
could take a look at it, maybe we can actually we'll paste a little picture of it in here. Maybe it's
because
really
it's in
weird.
one handwriting to start with, and then it just falls apart, and it's just this totally different script at the bottom.
It does seem to be at least be written in 2 different settings, and then there's also like the freaking detective like wrote his name on the front of it or something. Like, what the hell is that?
Did he?
Yeah, it's like
Brett?
Captain something. It's just who writes on a suicide note. It's just
Wait, what is this?
This is like the it says like Captain something just like scrawled like above the signature on the if I recall correctly.
Okay, I don't remember that component.
It's very strange.
Interesting.
It's very strange.
So, I mean, but pointing to the police response is an interesting place to start pulling this apart, because I'm surprised that it would be ruled so easily as a suicide. Is it just, you think, a tendency of dismissing like a drug-addled rock star as not being at the center of a dark plot, or
So here's what happened. It's as simple as this. As sad as this is, it's as simple as this. The everybody knew that Kurt was missing, for like 3 or 4 days. Nobody could find Kurt. The press was all there. Everybody was at the house. It was like flooded with people, and this person, I forget even who it was. This is why I'm partnered with Michelle, because she knows all these people and all these, she's got all these details. But this lady comes out of the house and says, "We found a suicide note." And then the second she says, "We found a suicide note," it's global international news. Kurt Cobain commits suicide. And at that point, you can't put that genie back into the bottle. And that was like the same day that he was found. A suicide note has been found at the scene. So at that point, the entire world thought that it was a suicide. And the case, it wasn't investigated after that. It was ruled a suicide that same day. And it's just because it got out into the press that this was a suicide, that this was a case of suicide, or that there was a suicide note.
But that's pretty weird, right? Because I mean, like, newspapers have printed, like, Dewey defeats Truman the morning after the presidential election. And it's not like they were like, oh, whoops, I guess Dewey did win the election. Sorry about that. It's like the fact that it's in the press seems to be dereliction of duty on the part of the police department to go with that story instead of investigating it. And so I wonder if you have a suspicion that there's some kind of, like,
corruption
could they have
within the
been bribed, or because it seems like a huge web for one
Police
person.
officers would never take bribes.
Well, I mean, it just becomes more difficult to. It's not that it becomes more difficult. It just starts to expand the spheres of influence that the person who did this must have, right? So if we assume that Courtney Love is the one who did this and organized this, then we probably need to also find some link between her and the police department that induces them to not investigate the death of a beloved rock star.
Yeah. So
there's a bunch of oddities too with the gun, right? Like there's just
I was
a
going
bunch
to say
of.
that we didn't talk about the crime scene, but it's pretty weird too, right?
I haven't even got started with that. So, yeah. I mean, there's so much weirdness. Now, let me just say that I would never say that I know who did it, or that I know how it was done. I mean, I literally can't say that and wouldn't say that, and, don't want to be, I can't say that because of legal purposes, and so, but that is going to be up to the authorities to figure out, exactly who, exactly when, exactly how, and that's only going to come through questioning everybody. But what I will say is that Courtney filed a police report in the name of Kurt Cobain's mother. She filed a false police report in the name of Kurt Cobain's mother while he was missing, and said Kurt is suicidal. She's really the one who started all of the suicidal stuff and started spreading that like all over the place, like about how suicidal he was, like right when he went missing. And that didn't exist between Rome and when he was was shot. Like none of the suicidal stuff existed until she started spreading it. To my understanding, that's my understanding. That's what I've been told by a lot of people who have looked into this. But yeah, she filed a false police report saying that Kurt Cobain is suicidal and please go find him, go look for him. And she filed that in the name of Kurt's mother. And so just a lot of weird things. Like you said, I actually bought the gun that was used to kill Kurt. The same, like not like the gun, the Seattle Police Department has the actual gun that was used, but the same model, the same exact gun. The serial number is very, very similar. It was made the same year as Kurt's was, and we've done some testing on that gun, and that gun doesn't eject shells unless the gun is shouldered. And so that's really important to know. If it's not like butted up against something, the shell doesn't eject from that gun. And the shell was ejected from the gun, and it was ejected to the wrong side of the room. If you look at like the way that Kurt's body was lying, the shell of the gun was lying to his left. And it was neatly placed onto a jacket that was folded up to Kurt's left. And so, did it really just happen to land there perfectly in the middle of the coat? But the ejector, if the gun was where Kurt was holding it with his cadaver grip, the shell would have ejected to the right side of his body. It wouldn't.
He was still holding the gun when they found him?
Yeah, he had a cadaver's grip on the gun. Yeah, and there were no fingerprints on the gun itself. The gun was wiped clean of fingerprints, and there was no blood splatter on the gun as well. So there was no blood on Kurt's hand. There was no blood splatter at all anywhere. And so, of course, that indicates that Kurt was already dead when he was shot, because his heart had stopped, pumping blood, and that is backed up by the amount of heroin that he had in his system. The Seattle Police Department, to that point and to today, have never seen a suicide by a shotgun with somebody who really would have already been dead. If they had that much heroin in their system, you're already dead. I mean, and you can argue, like tolerances, and maybe he had this extreme tolerance because he'd whatever. But I think that we think that it's much more likely that Kurt was already dead when the gun was fired. So
What about wasn't the heroin, were the heroin supplies put away by the time so that's the other piece of the puzzle, is heroin's extremely fast acting, especially if injected. And so not only did he have this whopping dose of heroin, but he also managed to sort of put things together for a little bit while he's just, stoned out of his gourd, and then somehow figure out how to do this deed.
Rolled down his sleeve, neatly buttoned his shirt on the sleeve that he had just shot up with, and tidied up all the heroin kit and the needles and the bands, and put them back into this box perfectly, and proceeded to shoot himself with a shotgun that is way too big for. I mean, when I try to reach the trigger, I have to point my index finger to try to get there, and I'm 6'1", and he's 5'9". I don't know that he could have even reached the trigger. We've got a little bit more testing to do to figure out if that's, maybe if he's using his toe, but again, the guy is clinically, stoned out of his mind to the point where he's probably dead already with this much heroin in him. So to figure out how to do all that and neatly place everything away and roll down your sleeve and button it, and then get to the point where you're shooting yourself. It's just, and nobody shoots themselves when they're that, when you're on heroin, you're in this, apparently, I've never tried it, but you're in this state of complete euphoria, and you don't want that to end. The time, if you're suicidal, the time where you're going to shoot yourself is when you're in that low period. And so I think if there's anything to this, and I think that there is, it was okay, well, it didn't work in Rome. Just the drugs didn't do it in Rome. So we're going to make sure that we really finish the job this next time. And, I think that's a possibility for, of what actually went down. And, but I do think we're going to find out. We're going to present all of this evidence to the authorities, and whether or not I die of a heroin overdose. I don't do heroin, by the way. So if I die of a straight heroin overdose in the next 3 days,
you better lock that shotgun up, my friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Stay away from trains too.
Yeah, exactly. This is still going forward. We're going to see this through to the end, and there's still witnesses that are alive between Bonnie and Joe. There's people with perspectives on this, like Rosemary Carroll. There's all kinds of forensic gun evidence that we're going to be presenting. There's the forensics. So I mean, I think that this is the best chance that this case has ever had of being reopened. And the only way that it wouldn't be reopened is if the SPD just completely ignores us. But the lawyer that I've teamed up with is very well respected. And it's just super interesting. As we've kind of started the process of working with him, he was skeptical. He was super skeptical of this. And wasn't even really sure if he wanted to take the case. But the more that we've worked on this thing, and the more that we've gathered evidence, and the more people that he's talked to, he's completely convinced now that this is that there's more here than just suicide. So it's been really an interesting evolution to see his mind kind of change over the last 8 months or so as he's worked on this case and talked to all these people. So yeah, this is one of those as I've excuse me, as I've investigated all these crazy conspiracies, this is one that jumps out as there's something here, guys, and let's figure this one out, because there's copycat suicides that occur every year on April 5th. I mean, even this year, there's still people that are killing themselves in the name of Kurt Cobain. It's nobody's shooting themselves up with heroin and then shooting themselves. That hasn't happened because nobody does that. But But there's still all of these suicides that are occurring every year, and it's like over 100 now that have occurred since he died. And we feel like it's time to put an end to that, and that there's no reason for that to continue. And it's really impacted an entire generation of Americans in a negative way. I have a son who just lost a friend to suicide by gun. Was a 17-year-old kid, and the imprint that leaves on the friends, the family, the parents, like all of it is just, it's devastating. It's traumatic. It's awful, and that impact. I think we all felt like we knew Kurt, and so the impact that had on an entire generation is just profound. And so, I think that if that was the truth, we could all handle it. It's like it's just part of life. But in this case, it doesn't appear to like that was the truth of the situation. So I'm passionate about this one, and I'm looking forward to getting some truth and some justice for Kurt.
Yeah, I think you're right about the impact that it had on a generation too, and that it also reinforces this weird mythos, the whole better to burn out than fade away mythos, right? That that this poet had, like, or whatever you want to call Kurt, this artist had reached, the zenith of what he thought was possible and just decided to check out, rather than just dissipate. But that's a really weird mythos for artists, because if you look at the real history of poetry and of literature, it's like it takes people a lifetime sometimes to really hone their craft. I would much rather, like, I'm biased because I want this to be true what you're saying. Like, I want to believe that if Kurt was alive today, he'd still be developing as an artist, the same way like Tom York is, right? Or some of these artists who, like, they're definitely huge rock stars when they're young and in their 20s, but they transcend that as the years go on, right? I definitely believe that is a much more valuable mythos to perpetuate, especially for young artists who are coming up. It's like, just because you're not young and beautiful, like, you can still create incredible stuff. And so, if this narrative does get rewritten, I think that it would have a really important impact on subsequent generations of artists as well.
Yep. Totally agree.
I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing how it develops. I think there's a lot of parallels between science and law in many ways, because it's the process of collecting evidence and prosecuting a case and figuring out where the shadow of a reasonable doubt lies. And so it's going to be really interesting to see you actually be able to do this with something that is more recent than, let's say, ancient civilizations or life on Mars, because the process is the same. And I think that it's going to be really wild to see it play out in real time through the eyes of somebody that's been spending so much time thinking about different possibilities for the past, where, well, here we have where the rubber meets the road. Like, can we do this for something that's much more recent, where we have a lot more evidence? And what does it look like to make that argument? And so I really look forward to seeing how this develops from your end.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. Yeah, I'm like I said, very passionate about it, and wouldn't be passionate about it if I didn't think that it was meaningful and that it was true. That there was truth to it. That it's not that it's not a cut and dry case of suicide like it was ruled. And the people in the Seattle Police Department, they're all gone today. They don't have anything to be embarrassed about. It's a totally different group of people with new eyes and new minds and open minds. And I feel like it's I feel like it's just like, let's get to the truth. We can all handle the truth, whatever it is. Let's figure out what the truth is, and we're not going to do that unless we investigate it. In this case, was never investigated, and there's just overwhelming evidence. So I'm excited to kind of push this to next, and I think it should be, not to put a time on it, but the team is pretty well certain that we can get this turned over by late May, early June, something like that. So,
what does the process of that look like? Do you have to go to a judge, or do you go to the police department? Who do you petition?
yeah, we go to the police department. Yeah. The lawyer is so well connected in Seattle that he's really going to guide that component of the process. But yeah, Michelle and I would fly to Seattle for that component of it, and we would hand over the case to the police department, and the chief of police hopefully would give us some time to to sit down and have us kind of talk through the case and what we know and what the evidence suggests, and then they can make a decision on whether or not they're going to reopen it. So that's all they have to do is change it. It doesn't have to be changed from suicide to murder. It just has to be changed from suicide to undetermined. And then once it's changed from suicide to undetermined, then they can really begin the investigation and start questioning people, and get to next on it.
That's wild. I look forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah. Thank you.
But we've kept you for almost 3 hours, and I think that we've opened a tremendous number of threads that will stay with us as we go forward. And there's a lot of ideas that are on the table here.
And people are going to have to just go over and check out your channel because you've gone deep on every one of the subjects we've talked about today.
Absolutely.
But man, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you. I mean, for having completely beat the Matrix and then devoted yourself to all of these really incredibly difficult questions. I just think that that's pretty awesome and admirable. So, yeah,
And
man,
also-
I salute you for that.
Yeah, and also that you keep this really even-keeled approach to it. That you're not like, they've been lying to us all along, all of these other things are true, and look at how bad it is. You're very measured and careful in the way that you approach things. And, we were talking earlier about building the future of a community that actually can deal with these questions. And I think that you really embody what is at the center of the entire project, which is just look at things. Like, you don't have to go from one extreme to the other. You don't have to leave one dogma and then put on the dogma of whoever comes next. It's this new phase of just look at things.
Can we talk about this?
Yeah, can we talk about this? Like, let's figure out what actually makes sense. And so I'm glad that we found you. I'm glad that you're out in the world doing your thing.
Cool. No, I
Thank you.
appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Very, very kind. And yeah, I mean, it's like I think at the basis, at the core of that, it's like, I mean, we all sort of attempt to define ourselves through our beliefs, our identification, our conditioning, our past, our job titles, our roles within society, and it's like none of that's really who we are. So like, why don't we attempt to detach from that and just look at things objectively, and just keep an open mind and be open to other people's perspectives, and realize that it's not truth is not belief is not truth, and perspective is really what everybody has, and everybody's entitled to perspective and opinion, and if we don't get too trapped up in making things 100% or 0%, then we can remain objective. And it feels like if science was doing that, if people were doing that, then there's less identification involved, there's less ego involved, and there's more progress that can be made. So it's something that I've attempted to practice over the last couple of years, and it's completely changed my life, and it's been a lot of fun, and I think good timing from a personal transformation point in terms of like starting a podcast, and being able to look at some of these issues objectively and not get into like arguments, not get into because like not get into like debates with people, but just let people kind of like tell their story, and let the audience decide what can I take away from this that's going to be helpful to me. If I'm not right, if I'm not wrong, if I then it's like that you're not limited, you're not it's not a self limitation. We can accomplish a lot more in our lives. So no, I appreciate you noticing that has been a practice, and it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. It just is, and it's something that I think can kind of help us all make progress and have better relationships and work together better with other people, and just enjoy the human experience more, enjoy life more. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right, everybody should check out Matt Bell's Limitless Podcast, and then we should catch up again down the line.
Yeah, I want to see where you're at after
Cool.
this summer's gone down and everything. Maybe we can swing back around next year and see what's going on.
Would love to, and really appreciate what you guys are doing too. I mean, it's very similar, kind of a mindset that I see within you guys, and it's like let's explore these topics and let's talk about them, and let's get to some truth. So, super respect you guys, and when you invited me on here, I was definitely honored and excited to come on and talk to you, and it's I think it's lived up to the hype, to the excitement. So thank you guys for what you do for the world as well. It's meaningful work that you guys are doing. So thank you.
I would have loved fast.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, we'll sign off, and yeah, man, good luck with the Cobain work, and we'll see you again down the line. All right.
Cool. Appreciate it, guys.
Bye, everybody.